struggling single mother showed gentle kindness to a powerful CEO's mute daughter, unaware his gratitude would change her shattered life forever. Please, just one more week. The biting cold of the late afternoon wind whipped across the deserted playground, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and forgotten promises, a relentless and wild assault on the senses. Alistair Blackwood pulled the collar of his impeccable cashmere coat tighter around his neck, the expensive fabric doing little to warm the hollow ache that had settled permanently in his chest where his heart used to be. He was failing. His gaze fell upon his daughter, Lily, a fragile porcelain doll with haunted eyes, sitting perfectly still on a swing that did not move, her small hands clutching the chains with a grip that was far too tight for a 5-year-old. For 1 year, 3 months, and 11 days, she had not uttered a single sound, the vibrant, laughing world of a child locked away behind a door of traumatic silence, a door he had no key to open. The car accident that had stolen his beloved wife, Amelia, had also stolen his daughter's voice, leaving him a king of a corporate empire and a pauper in the halls of his own cavernous home. He could command boardrooms and bend markets to his will with a single phone call, but he could not coax a single, simple word from the person who mattered most in the entire world. Total silence. From across the damp woodchips, another pair of eyes watched, not with pity, but with a quiet, profound understanding that felt ancient and deep. Alara felt the worn fabric of her own thin coat do little to fend off the chill, a familiar sensation that mirrored the constant, gnawing worry that lived inside her. She held the small, warm hand of her son, Leo, a boisterous 6-year-old whose laughter was the only thing keeping the encroaching shadows of their life at bay. She saw the man, his clothes screaming wealth in a way that was almost offensive in this gray, forgotten corner of the city, and she saw the unspoken agony in the set of his shoulders. Her eyes, however, were drawn to the little girl, a silent statue in a world of motion. Alara knew that kind of grief. It was a ghost that shared her small, cramped apartment, a constant reminder of the husband she had lost too soon and the mountain of debt his illness had left behind. She lived a life of desperate calculations, of stretching every last coin until it screamed, of choosing between heating and a full meal for her son. The eviction notice tucked inside her pocket felt like a shard of ice against her skin. "Mommy, can I go play?" Leo's voice was a bright splash of color in the monochrome day, his eyes fixed on the empty slide. Alara managed a gentle, sincere smile, a small, brave flag of resilience against the siege of her despair. "Of course, my love. But be gentle," he nodded and ran off, his scuffed sneakers kicking up bits of bark. He approached the silent girl on the swing, his own innocence a powerful, unshielded force. "Want to push?" he asked, his voice full of childish hope. Lily didn't move, her gaze remaining fixed on some distant, invisible point that only she could see. Her father took a half-step forward, his body tense, ready to intervene, to shield her from a world that had already proven too cruel. But then he saw the woman, the boy's mother, approaching not with intrusion, but with a grace that was as quiet and steady as a soft hush. She stopped a respectful distance away, her expression one of pure, undiluted empathy. She was not looking at him, the powerful man in the expensive coat. She was looking at his daughter, and for the first time in a very long time, Alistair felt someone truly see the shattered child and not the CEO's tragic daughter. Alara knelt down so she was at eye level with the small, silent girl, the wet ground soaking through the knees of her worn jeans without her even noticing. She didn't speak to Lily directly, understanding that a direct question was a demand, and this child had nothing left to give. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone, one she and Leo had painted to look like a ladybug. She held it in her open palm. "This is Lucy the ladybug," she said, her voice as soft and gentle as falling snow. "Sometimes, she gets very scared and hides in her shell. She doesn't want to talk to anyone." Alistair watched, his breath caught in his throat, a strange, painful pressure building behind his eyes. He saw the flicker in Lily's gaze, the barest hint of a shift from the void to the small, painted stone in the woman's hand. Leo, picking up on his mother's cue with the uncanny wisdom of a loved child, knelt beside her. "Lucy doesn't have to talk," Leo said seriously. "We can just be quiet with her." He placed a small, plastic dinosaur next to the stone. "Rex can be quiet with her." Elara smiled at her son. A look of such tender, profound love that it made Alistair's heart ache with a fresh wave of his own loss. Then, she looked back at Lily, her eyes unwavering. "They can be quiet together," she affirmed softly. "Until they're ready." For a moment that stretched into an eternity, nothing happened. The wind sighed through the barren trees, a lonely, mournful sound. Alistair's hope, a fragile thing he hadn't even realized he was holding, began to wither. It was just another failed attempt, another dead end in the labyrinth of his grief. He was about to step forward, to gather his silent daughter and retreat back to their sterile, silent mansion. But then it happened. Lily's small hand, which had been clenched around the swing's chain, slowly uncurled. Her tiny finger reached out, trembling, and gently touched the top of Leo's hand. Her gaze lifted from the toys and met Leo's, a flicker of light in her previously hollow eyes. A small, almost inaudible sound escaped her lips, a breath of a word, a ghost of a sound that was nevertheless the most beautiful thing Alistair had ever heard. It was so quiet he almost thought he had imagined it. "Leo," she whispered, her voice cracked and unused. A single, perfect word. The world stopped spinning. Alistair froze, the sound hitting him with the force of a physical blow. A seismic shock that splintered the ice that had encased his heart for over a year. He gasped, a sharp, ragged intake of air. His daughter, his silent, shattered Lily, had spoken. And it wasn't for him. It was for this kind-faced boy and his mother, this stranger in a threadbare coat who had offered nothing but a painted stone and a moment of selfless, unconditional patience. The too long, one short pattern was broken by the sheer emotional force of the moment. The silence that followed was different. It was not empty, but filled with the profound weight of the single word that now hung in the cold air. Elara's eyes widened, shimmering with unshed tears, not of sadness, but of a purely cathartic joy for this stranger's breakthrough. She looked from the child to the father, and she saw the raw, unveiled shock on his face, the glistening moisture in his eyes that he quickly tried to blink away. He looked completely undone, his commanding presence stripped away to reveal the desperate, grieving father beneath. He stumbled forward, his polished shoes scuffing on the dirt, a man unmoored by a miracle. He knelt before his daughter, his hands hovering, unsure if touching her would break the spell. "Lily?" he breathed, his voice thick with an emotion so raw it was almost unbearable. "Lily, did you?" Lily simply looked at him, her expression still distant, but with a new softness around her eyes. She had retreated back into her quiet world, but a window had been opened. A sliver of light had pierced the darkness. He felt a sob catch in his throat. He turned to Elara, his expression a chaotic mix of disbelief, gratitude, and something akin to awe. He fumbled for his wallet, his hands trembling. It was a reflexive action, the only way he knew how to respond, to quantify the unquantifiable. I don't know what to say," he stammered, pulling out a thick wad of crisp bills. "Please, you must let me for what you've done." Elara's gentle expression hardened slightly, not with anger, but with a quiet, unwavering dignity. She slowly stood up, brushing the dampness from her knees, and placed a gentle hand on Leo's shoulder. "That isn't necessary," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I didn't do anything. Your daughter is very brave." She held his gaze, and in that moment, Alistair felt as though she could see every one of his failings, not with judgment, but with a deep, sorrowful empathy that was somehow more piercing. She saw a man who had tried to buy his daughter's healing, who had hired the best therapists and specialists money could find, all of whom had failed where a simple, selfless act of human connection had succeeded. He felt a profound sense of shame. He was a transactional man in a world of emotions he could no longer navigate. "Please," he insisted, his voice cracking. "I have to." Elara gave a small, sad shake of her head. "Kindness isn't something you pay for," she said simply. "It's something you pass on." She gave him a final, sincere smile, a gesture of pure, unblemished grace. I'm glad she felt safe enough to speak. She squeezed Leo's hand. Come on, sweet boy. It's getting late. We have to go home. Alistair could only watch, speechless, as she and her son walked away, their figures growing smaller until they were swallowed by the gray twilight. He stood there, a powerful man rendered utterly powerless, clutching a handful of useless money as the first drops of a cold, relentless rain began to fall. The receipt for the miracle she had just performed was nowhere to be found, because it did not exist. He didn't even know her name. He had let her walk away. He looked down at his daughter, who was now quietly tracing the outline of the painted ladybug stone that Alara had left behind on the swing. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his soul, that he couldn't let it end like this. He didn't know it yet, but that quiet, dignified woman held the key not just to his daughter's voice, but to his own shattered heart. He had to find her. The pounding rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alistair's office, a frantic, desperate rhythm that matched the newfound urgency thudding in his chest. The sterile silence of the penthouse suite, usually a comfort, now felt like an accusation, a cavernous reminder of the emotional emptiness of his life. He was a ghost haunting his own success. For 2 days, he had his best people, private investigators with discreet, impeccable records, searching for the woman from the park. He had given them a description that felt both vivid and hopelessly inadequate. A woman with gentle eyes, a worn brown coat, and a dignity that could not be manufactured. He described her son, a bright-eyed boy named Leo. He described the painted stone. It felt like searching for a myth, a spirit who had appeared in his life only to vanish again. He paced the polished marble floor, the sleek, modern furniture and priceless art mocking him with their cold perfection. Nothing in this room mattered. None of the awards, the stock tickers, the symbols of his immense power, held any value compared to the single whispered word from his daughter. He had to repay the debt. Meanwhile, Alara's world was shrinking, the walls of her small apartment closing in with each passing hour. The final eviction notice had arrived, its stark, black letters a death sentence for the fragile life she had built for her son. The landlady, Mrs. Gable, a woman whose heart seemed to be made of withered, bitter stone, had been merciless. 7 days, Miss Vance, she had hissed through the door. Then the locks are changed. Alara sat at her small, rickety kitchen table, the flickering light from the cheap lamp casting long shadows across her pale, weary face. She stared at the pile of bills, an insurmountable mountain of paper that represented 1,000 sleepless nights. She had felt a strange, lingering warmth after the encounter in the park, a brief, golden glow of connection that had momentarily pushed back the despair. But reality had returned with a biting cold, and the memory now seemed like a dream from another life. She was alone. She clutched the worn silver locket around her neck, a photograph of her late husband inside, and whispered into the heavy silence of the room. I don't know what to do, Michael. I just don't know how to keep us safe anymore. On the 3rd day, Alistair's investigator called. Mr. Blackwood, the man's crisp voice said through the speakerphone. We've found her. Alara Vance. Single mother. Son named Leo. Lives at 142B Orchard Street. She's in some trouble, sir. Significant financial hardship. Facing eviction at the end of the week. A tidal wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled his knees washed over Alistair, quickly followed by a cold, protective fury. The woman who had given him back a piece of his soul was about to be thrown onto the street. The thought was unbearable. He felt a renewed purpose, a clarity he hadn't experienced since before Amelia's death. This was not about charity. This was about justice. It was about restoring balance to a world that had rewarded her profound goodness with nothing but suffering. He gave his investigator a series of quiet, commanding instructions. His voice was steady, precise, the voice of a CEO executing a flawless takeover. There would be no direct contact yet. He wouldn't risk frightening her or cheapening her act of kindness by appearing as some sort of brash benefactor. The intervention had to be as gentle and selfless as she was. It had to be a quiet miracle. The next morning, an unmarked envelope appeared under Alara's door. Her heart pounded as she opened it, expecting another warning from the landlady. Instead, she found a series of official receipts from the building's management company. Her rent, paid in full, for the next 6 months. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she sank onto the floor, the papers trembling in her hand. There was no note, no explanation, only a stamp that read, "Paid by anonymous benefactor." Disbelief warred with a desperate, burgeoning hope in her chest. Was it a mistake? A clerical error? A miracle? She didn't know what to believe. 2 days later, a delivery of groceries arrived, boxes filled with fresh fruit, vegetables, and the expensive organic snacks Leo loved but she could never afford. Again, no note. The receipt simply said it had been paid for by a friend a week after that. She received a call from a prestigious design firm, a place she had sent her resume to months ago with no reply. They were offering her an interview for a junior graphic designer position. A job with a salary that would not just keep her afloat, but allow her to build a future. A job that felt impossibly out of reach. It was all too much. A series of benevolent mysteries that left her feeling both profoundly grateful and deeply bewildered. She didn't understand. Alistair watched from a distance, orchestrating these small acts of salvation from the shadows. He had his team monitor her situation, ensuring every anonymous gift was delivered with the utmost discretion. He learned about her talent for art, her quiet resilience, her unwavering devotion to her son. Each new piece of information only deepened his awe for her. He was not just helping her. He was studying her, trying to understand the source of her light. He started taking Lily to the same park at the same time every day, a quiet, unspoken hope blooming in his chest. He told himself it was for Lily, who now carried the painted ladybug stone with her everywhere, a sacred talisman. But he knew, in the deepest part of his healing heart, it was for him too. He needed to see her again. And then, one crisp, sunny afternoon, he did. She was sitting on a bench, a sketchbook open on her lap, a small, peaceful smile on her face. Leo was chasing pigeons nearby, his laughter echoing in the clear air. She looked different. The weary, haunted look in her eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet serenity. The weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders, and her true, gentle spirit was shining through. She looked up, and their eyes met across the park. His heart thudded. There was no hiding this time. He walked toward her, Lily's small hand tucked securely in his, a silent but powerful symbol of the gift Alara had given him. Alara's eyes widened in recognition, a soft blush rising on her cheeks. She stood up, a mixture of surprise and a strange, undeniable familiarity in her expression. "It's you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The little girl, is she?" Before she could finish, Lily stepped forward from behind her father's legs. She held out the painted stone to Alara. "Lucy," she said, her voice still quiet, but clear and steady. "Thank you for Lucy." Alara's face broke into a smile so radiant it seemed to outshine the sun. She knelt down and took the stone, her fingers brushing Lily's. "You're so welcome, sweet girl. I'm so happy to see you again." Alistair's voice was thick with emotion when he finally spoke. "My name is Alistair," he said, extending a hand that was surprisingly steady. "And I never properly thanked you for what you did. You performed a miracle for my family." Miss Vance. Alara shook his hand, her own grip firm and warm. "Please," she said, her smile unwavering. "Call me Alara." In that moment, surrounded by the simple beauty of the park, a new connection was forged, no longer as strangers, but as two souls who had, through a selfless act of kindness, begun to heal one another. They sat on the park bench, a comfortable silence settling between them as they watched their children play together. A perfect, seamless picture of childish joy. Lily was no longer a silent observer. She was an active participant, her small giggles joining Leo's loud, boisterous laughter. The sound was the most beautiful music Alistair had ever heard. He finally turned to Alara, his expression serious and raw. "I have to confess something," he began, his voice low. "The rent, the groceries, the job interview. That was me. I found you. I couldn't just walk away without knowing you were all right. He expected her to be angry, to feel that he had intruded or overstepped, cheapening her kindness. But Alara simply looked at him, her gaze clear and understanding. There was no shock, no offense, only a quiet acceptance. I suspected, she admitted softly. No one else would have a reason to be so kind. But why? The question hung in the air, simple and profound. It wasn't about the money. It was about the motive. Alistair took a deep breath, the confession he was about to make feeling more significant than any business deal he had ever closed. Because for the first time in over a year, he said, his voice thick with unshed tears, you made me feel hope. You didn't see a CEO or a rich man. You saw a father in pain, and you offered help without asking for anything in return. In a world that has become so transactional, so cold, you showed my daughter and me what pure, selfless kindness looks like. You reminded me that there is still light in the world. He told her everything then, right there on that park bench under the gentle afternoon sun. He spoke of the car accident, the screech of tires and the shattering of glass that echoed in his nightmares. He described his wife, Amelia, her vibrant spirit, and the unbearable silence that had descended upon his life after she was gone. He confessed how Lily had been in the car, how she had seen everything, and how her voice had vanished along with her mother. The words poured out of him, a torrent of grief and guilt he had kept locked inside for so long. Alara listened, her eyes never leaving his face. She didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. She simply listened, her presence a steady, solid anchor in the storm of his memories. Her quiet, unwavering attention was a gift in itself, making him feel truly seen and heard for the first time in his lonely grief. When he was finished, his voice a hoarse whisper, she didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm, a simple, profound gesture of shared humanity. The warmth from her touch seemed to seep directly into his soul, soothing a pain he thought would never dull. The contact was brief. It was not romantic. It was sacred. Then, in the quiet intimacy of that shared space, she told him her story. She spoke of her husband, Michael, an artist with a brilliant mind and a fragile body. She described his long illness, the hope that had dwindled with each new medical report, and the mountain of bills that had grown into an avalanche, burying them in debt long before she had to bury him. She spoke of the loneliness, the crushing weight of being a single parent, and the constant fear of failing her son. Her voice didn't tremble with self-pity, but resonated with a quiet, dignified strength that humbled Alistair to his core. He saw a woman who had faced her own unbearable tragedy and had emerged not bitter or broken, but with a heart that was still open, still capable of immense compassion for a stranger in a park. They were two sides of the same coin, two people shattered by loss, who had been managing their grief in opposite ways. He had retreated into a fortress of wealth and power, isolating himself from the world. She had remained in the world, facing its harshest realities, yet had somehow managed to protect the purest part of her spirit. He realized then that his anonymous gifts hadn't saved her. Her resilience, her virtue had already done that. He had merely provided the resources for her strength to flourish. The afternoon light began to fade, casting a golden glow over the park. It was time to go. As they gathered their children, a new, unspoken understanding existed between them. It was a fragile, tender bond forged in the crucible of shared tragedy. I would like to see you again, Alara, Alistair said, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. Perhaps for dinner? And Lily would love to see Leo again. Alara's smile was genuine, lighting up her entire face. We'd like that very much, she replied. For the next few weeks, their lives began to intertwine in a gentle, natural rhythm. They shared dinners, not in fancy, ornate restaurants, but in Alara's small, cozy apartment, where Alistair felt more at home than he had in years. They took the children to museums and zoos, functioning less like two separate units and more like a single, cohesive family. Lily's voice grew stronger each day, her vocabulary expanding, her laughter becoming a regular, beautiful fixture in their lives. Alistair watched Alara with his children, with his daughter, and he saw the mother Lily had lost and the partner he desperately needed. He was falling in love, not just with her kindness, but with her strength, her quiet wisdom, and the unwavering grace with which she navigated the world. But their peaceful bubble of healing was about to be shattered by the cruelty of a world that did not understand. The confrontation came without warning, a sudden and vicious storm on a clear day. Alara was in the lobby of her apartment building, collecting her mail, when Mrs. Gable, the landlady, cornered her. The woman's face was a mask of smug cruelty, her eyes gleaming with malice. She was holding a crumpled bank receipt in her hand, waving it like a weapon. "I knew it," Mrs. Gable sneered, her voice loud enough for the other tenants in the lobby to hear. "I knew there was something fishy about you. A woman like you suddenly having her rent paid for 6 months in advance? Where did you get this kind of money, Ms. Vance?" Alara froze, her blood turning to ice. Her quiet, private miracle was being twisted into something ugly and sordid in a public forum. "That's none of your business," Alara said, her voice trembling but her gaze steady. She tried to move past, but Mrs. Gable blocked her path. "Oh, I think it is my business," the landlady shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "Decent people live in this building. We don't need your kind bringing trouble here. Did you steal it? Or did you find some rich man to feel sorry for you? You should be ashamed of yourself." The humiliation was a physical blow. Alara felt the stares of her neighbors, the whispers, the judgment. She stood there, pale and dignified, but utterly cornered, her hands clenched at her sides. She felt her carefully rebuilt world beginning to splinter. Just as a sob threatened to escape her throat, the heavy glass doors of the lobby swung open with a soft click that somehow cut through the landlady's shrill accusations. A commanding silence fell over the small, crowded space. Alistair Blackwood stepped inside, flanked by a man in a crisp, dark suit holding a leather briefcase. Alistair was not dressed as the grieving father from the park. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit of charcoal gray, his presence radiating an aura of absolute, unquestionable power. He looked like what he was, a king who had just walked into the middle of a peasant's squabble. His eyes, cold and sharp as polished steel, swept over the scene and landed on Mrs. Gable. His calm was more terrifying than any rage. "There seems to be a misunderstanding here," he said, his voice quiet but echoing with authority in the sudden, heavy silence. He walked calmly to Alara's side, placing a protective hand on the small of her back. The simple gesture was a declaration. He turned his unwavering gaze back to the now faltering landlady. Mrs. Gable stammered, "And who are you?" Alistair's expression didn't change. "My name is Alistair Blackwood," he said, letting the name hang in the air. A sharp gasp rippled through the onlookers as they recognized the name of one of the city's most powerful and reclusive billionaires. "The money you're referring to," Alistair continued, his voice dropping to a dangerously low tone, "came from me. I was the anonymous benefactor, and I can assure you it was not given out of pity." He took a step closer to Mrs. Gable, who visibly shrank back. "It was given as a hopelessly inadequate down payment on a debt of gratitude I will spend the rest of my life repaying. This woman, Alara Vance, showed my daughter a kindness so profound it saved her. She possesses more integrity, more grace, and more dignity in her little finger than you have displayed in this entire, pathetic spectacle." The public defense was absolute. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted. It had been completely and irrevocably reversed. The whispers of the tenants now turned to murmurs of awe directed at Alara and glares of contempt for the landlady. Mrs. Gable's face had turned a mottled, unhealthy shade of red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She was speechless. Alistair was not finished. He turned to the man with the briefcase. "Mr. Davies," he said calmly, "you have the paperwork?" "Yes, sir," the assistant replied, opening the briefcase and producing a thick file. Alistair took the file and placed it firmly on the lobby's front desk. "As of 10 minutes ago, Blackwood Industries completed the acquisition of this building." "Which means, Mrs. Gable," he said, turning his cold eyes back on her. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. You have 1 hour to vacate your apartment. Security will escort you. Total silence. Then he turned his back on the shattered woman, his attention focused solely on Alara, whose eyes were glistening with tears of shock and overwhelming relief. He gently took her arm. Let's go home, he said softly. And as he led her and a wide-eyed Leo out of the lobby and toward the gleaming, sleek black car waiting at the curb, it was clear he didn't just mean her small apartment upstairs. He meant a new home, a new life, a future. He took them not to her apartment, but to his own stately, cavernous house, a place that had felt like a mausoleum for the past year. But with Alara and Leo inside, it felt different. Leo's delighted laughter echoed in the grand foyer, chasing away the ghosts of silence. Lily ran to meet him, and the two children immediately began to play, filling the sterile space with a life and warmth it had not known. Alistair led Alara into the vast living room, where a fire was already crackling in the hearth, casting a golden glow on the polished marble floors. She stood in the center of the room, looking small and overwhelmed, her worn coat a stark contrast to the ornate surroundings. He gently took it from her, replacing it with a soft cashmere blanket from the sofa. He guided her to the plush couch and sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. Her hands were still trembling. Alistair, you didn't have to do that, she whispered, her voice still shaky from the ordeal. Buying the building, firing that woman. He turned to her, his expression more tender and open than she had ever seen it. Yes, I did, he said firmly. I will not allow anyone to disrespect you. I will not stand by while the world tries to punish you for being good and kind. Your battle is over, Alara. You don't have to fight anymore. Let me fight for you. The air between them shimmered with unspoken emotion. The pretense of friendship, of a simple connection between two parents, fell away, revealing the profound, undeniable truth beneath. This was more than gratitude. It was more than a bond over shared grief. It was love, a deep, cathartic love born from a moment of pure, selfless connection in a cold, lonely park. You don't understand, he continued, his voice cracking with the weight of his confession. That day in the park, you didn't just give Lily back her voice. You gave me back my life. I was drowning, Alara, drowning in grief and guilt, and I had forgotten how to breathe. You reached into that darkness and you pulled me out. Your kindness was the flashlight that showed me the way back to the light. He moved closer, his hand finding hers, his fingers lacing through her own. Felt right, felt like coming home. I love you, Alara Vance, he said. The words simple, direct, and filled with a universe of meaning. I know it's fast, and I know my world is so different from yours. But I also know that a heart like yours is the rarest and most valuable thing in this world. I want to spend the rest of my life cherishing it, protecting it. Marry me, and let me give you and Leo the life of security and peace you both so richly deserve. Tears streamed down Alara's face. But they were not tears of sorrow or fear. They were tears of disbelief, of hope, of a profound, soul-stirring joy. In the eyes of this powerful, kind man, she finally saw a safe harbor. She saw a future free from worry. She saw a partner. She saw love. Yes, she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Yes, he leaned in and kissed her. A gentle, tender kiss that was not about passion, but about promise. It was a kiss that sealed their two broken halves into a single, healed whole. 1 year later, the golden afternoon sun streamed through the large bay windows of a beautiful, warm home that was neither his sterile mansion nor her cramped apartment, but a new space they had chosen together. The air was filled with the sounds of life, the happy chatter of children and the soft melody of a piano being played with gentle, confident hands. Alara sat at the grand piano, her fingers dancing across the keys, a peaceful smile on her face. She was no longer the weary, desperate woman in a threadbare coat. She was radiant, her quiet strength now underscored by a deep, unshakable happiness. Leo was building an elaborate castle of blocks on the thick Persian rug with Lily, their heads bent together in serious concentration. Lily was a different child entirely. Gone was the silent, haunted doll from the park. In her place was a bright, articulate, and joyful 6-year-old who never stopped talking, her laughter the constant, beautiful soundtrack of their new life. Alistair stood in the doorway watching his family, a look of such profound love and contentment on his face that it seemed to have erased all the years of pain. He walked over to the piano, leaning down to kiss his wife's temple. "I love hearing you play," he murmured against her hair. She leaned into his touch, her playing never faltering. "And I love having a reason to play again," she replied softly. He looked at their children, at the perfect, idyllic scene before him. He had thought his wealth was his greatest power, but he had been wrong. Love was the ultimate currency. Kindness was the greatest investment, and his return was a life more priceless than his entire fortune. He was home. This story is a fable, a testament to the quiet, seismic power of a single, selfless act. It reminds us that in a world that often feels cold and transactional, the most valuable things, kindness, empathy, and human connection, are given freely, without expectation of reward. Alara, with nothing to her name but a pure heart, offered a moment of gentle understanding to a stranger. That one act created a ripple that not only saved a child, but healed a broken man and forged a new family from the ashes of grief. It teaches us that true strength is not in commanding boardrooms, but in kneeling to comfort a lonely child, and that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the love you give and the hope you inspire. If this story touched your heart and reaffirmed your faith in the goodness of people, we hope you'll continue to follow our journey. We believe that stories like these are more than just entertainment. They are a necessary reminder of the light that exists in the world, a beacon of hope that can guide us through our own darkest moments. Our goal is to continue creating narratives that celebrate the quiet courage, the unwavering dignity, and the profound love that can change lives in the most unexpected ways. Please help us spread this message of hope and kindness by taking a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales. Your support allows us to continue bringing you more soul-stirring stories that warm the heart and inspire the spirit. Every click helps us build a community centered on the power of compassion. We'll see you in the next one.